The machine guns opened fire. Bullets ripped through the wheat fields as the soldiers waited for the birds to drop. They were certain the operation would be over within minutes. Instead, the emus scattered in every direction. Small groups broke away at incredible speed, disappearing into the tall grass before the soldiers could adjust their aim. Within moments, the fields were almost empty. The Australian army had just failed its first attack against birds. It sounded impossible, but it was real. In 1932, Australia sent real soldiers into Western Australia armed with Lewis machine guns, military trucks, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Their mission seemed simple: stop the massive flocks of emus destroying farmers' crops. Nobody expected the birds to fight back without ever attacking. Every new plan ended the same way. The moment the soldiers got close, the emus scattered. They ran across rough farmland faster than the trucks could follow, making accurate shooting nearly impossible. Even when the machine guns found their target, the birds refused to behave like the army expected. One officer later joked that the emus had commanders of their own because they always seemed to know exactly when to run. Before long, newspapers across Australia began laughing at the operation. Headlines mocked the military, calling it the Army versus Birds. What had started as a serious mission was quickly turning into an international embarrassment. But instead of admitting defeat, Australia decided to try again. More soldiers returned. More ammunition was delivered. The government was determined to prove it could win. What happened next would turn the Emu War into one of the strangest military stories ever recorded. The first attack had failed. The soldiers returned empty-handed, and the newspapers were already beginning to mock the operation. But for the farmers, there was nothing funny about it. Every morning, thousands of emus poured into the wheat fields. They smashed through fences, trampled crops, and ate everything in their path. Weeks of hard work disappeared in a matter of hours. Entire farms were being devastated, and many families feared they would lose their livelihoods if nothing changed. Desperate farmers once again turned to the Australian government, begging for help. At first, officials hesitated. Sending soldiers to fight birds sounded ridiculous, but as the damage continued to spread, the pressure became impossible to ignore. Eventually, the government made an extraordinary decision. The army would return. This time, they were determined to finish the job. On paper, the mission still looked simple. Find the birds, set up the machine guns, open fire, end the problem. Nobody expected the emus to put up much of a fight. After all, they were only birds. But the soldiers were about to discover that these birds had one enormous advantage. They were incredibly fast, constantly on the move, and impossible to predict. The order was finally given. Fire! Machine guns thundered across the fields as bullets ripped through the grass. For a brief moment, it looked as if the operation might succeed. Then the emus did exactly what they had done before. Instead of staying together, they split into dozens of smaller groups and sprinted in every direction. Within seconds, they had vanished into the open countryside. The soldiers had fired hundreds of rounds, with almost nothing to show for it. The army had expected a quick victory. Instead, they found an opponent they couldn't catch, couldn't surround, and couldn't outsmart. Every failed attack made the mission more embarrassing. And the strangest part was, this was only the beginning. The army believed they had learned from their mistakes. The second operation began before sunrise. This time, the army was determined not to repeat its earlier mistakes. A new plan had been prepared. Instead of waiting for the emus to gather, the soldiers would hunt them down. Military trucks rolled across the farmland with Lewis machine guns mounted on the back. The officers believed speed would finally give them the advantage. For the first time, victory seemed within reach, but almost as soon as the chase began, everything started falling apart. The farmland was far rougher than anyone had expected. The trucks bounced over rocks, ditches, and uneven ground so violently that the gunners could barely keep their weapons steady. Every time they lined up a shot, the vehicle lurched in another direction. The machine guns rattled wildly, but the bullets missed their targets. Meanwhile, the emus simply kept running, easily outracing the struggling trucks. As the days went by, the soldiers noticed something they couldn't explain. The emus didn't behave like frightened animals. Whenever danger appeared, a few birds often stayed behind, almost as if they were keeping watch, while the rest escaped to safety. One officer later joked that the birds seemed to have their own commanders directing the flock. It sounded ridiculous, but after everything they had seen, nobody was laughing anymore. The operation dragged on. Thousands of bullets were fired across the wheat fields. Hours were spent chasing birds through open farmland, yet only a handful of emus were actually stopped. Every failed attempt made the mission more frustrating, and every passing day made the army look less prepared for the task they had been given. Soon, newspapers across Australia and around the world turned the story into a joke. Headlines mocked the military, claiming that Australia had declared war on birds and was losing. What had begun as a serious operation to protect struggling farmers had become one of the biggest public embarrassments the Australian army had ever faced. Eventually, the government accepted the obvious. The military operation was called off and the soldiers returned home. The farmers were forced to rely on stronger fences and other methods to protect their crops. The emus remained exactly where they had always been, roaming across the countryside as if nothing had happened. Today, the Great Emu War is remembered as one of the strangest true stories in military history. An army armed with machine guns, military trucks, and trained soldiers had been sent to defeat a flock of flightless birds, and failed to do it. Nearly a century later, people still laugh at the story, but it remains a remarkable reminder that even the best equipped armies can underestimate